Hey, welcome back to my show. I'm glad that you could join me. We're out here, lovely Chatfield Reservoir this morning. It's turning out to be a beautiful day. Kind of overcast, but that's nice. Giving me good lighting for the show. I'm glad you could be here. Yeah. So, a whole bunch of stuff has transpired since last I spoke to you guys. We had the 4th of July. That was fantastic. I assure you that only legal fireworks were procured and or ignited, and it was extremely safe. Nothing went bang, nothing went into the air, nobody did anything they weren't supposed to do. It was 100% compliant with the law. Yes. I do love on the 4th of July how people are just like not giving a fuck, and they're celebrating. You got to celebrate something. And we're not going to let people tell us that we can't have a little fun on the 4th of July, because this nation was born out of rebellion, not born out of compliance. Always remember that. So, a fun time was had by all. We had a great assortment of completely legal and compliant fireworks. They were awesome. We lit those off. We had a great time. I hope you did too. While we were driving around, Becky got an amazing video of some 4th of July fireworks going off at a great spot in Greeley. And it turned out to be a pretty good video. I'll have to throw that up here so you guys can see it. It's good stuff. All right. In my next topic, the floods down in Texas. What a terrible tragedy that is. To make light of parents losing their kids, or to give some nasty, like, well, that's what you voted for kind of shit for something like that, kind of above and beyond the call of duty for being an a-hole, right? Somebody's in the middle of having a complete tragedy. When last I checked, I think the death toll was around 101, I think, and that they had reduced the number of missing, but I'm not exactly sure why. So thoughts, love, and prayers go to the families who are affected by that. In my next topic, Ozzy Osbourne gave his final farewell performance in London. And it was pretty huge. I heard a piece of isolated audio from his microphone that sort of emphasized how far along he is in his journey. Right? Ozzy has had a truly incredible and amazing career. And I've been fortunate enough to see him perform, I think, 3 occasions. And I also was a security guard in the pit for an Ozzy show. And Ozzy was like right there. So we say farewell to an amazing legend of rock and roll and heavy metal. And although people try to paint Ozzy as satanic, I think if you examine the body of his work, I think he gives equal time to God and Satan. And that's what's fair, right? When you're singing about the world, it's hard to not sing about some of the darker parts of it, right? Yeah. So, an incredible highlight on the end of an amazing career. Yeah. I feel glad I got to see him a few times and watch him perform and see Black Sabbath. They were freaking amazing, right? Yeah. So that happened. In my next topic, I had some more time to sort of cogitate on the whole Epstein moves and why the government might pursue a tack of sweeping it under the rug and all of that. And I got to thinking about how it actually makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of if Trump was to try and move the DOJ to prosecute so many people in the government, they would argue that he has weaponized the DOJ and that he is doing dictatorly type things, and our feelings are hurt by that. And all of a sudden the left and Democrats would become about laws and following laws and justice and all this stuff that they sort of are not about when they're in charge. When they're in charge, they're not about justice. Holding people that walked through the Capitol building for J6 for 4 years without trials and stuff, that's not cool, right? So because the left would have cried foul and argued that Donald Trump was weaponizing the DOJ, I think that it would have thrown a stumbling block in front of anything that they tried to bring out, whether it was true or contrived or otherwise. Even if it was true, it would be fought all along the way. And I got to thinking about how the DOJ does not have a tremendous track record of prosecuting political people. They've done it a couple of times, a little bit here and there, but not much. Usually what we mostly have come to expect as Americans is almost no to zero accountability for anything that any of these dirt bags do at that level. And as a result of that, I came to realize that it's actually better to keep the information for a rainy day. A dead man switch, if you will, where you can always hold it over them up until the time you expose it. Once you expose it, you've sort of you've thrown it out to the public to decide which way they'll go, one way or the other, about it. And sadly, American society has become so ill-informed and uncivically minded that I'm not sure anything would really happen. I feel like there's people in the government that you could tell everybody that they were straight up involved in all that Jeffrey Epstein stuff and the things that were going on there, and nothing would happen. Nothing would happen. I mean, I would love to be wrong. I would love to be completely wrong. But it just seems like the highest level forces protect this entire subject. It belongs to them, and they don't want to let anybody mess up the thing they got going on. So I think the reason that they aren't releasing the information is because they'd rather keep it than squander it. They'd rather use it to blackmail somebody than to waste it on a prosecution that's toothless and that doesn't really have enough evidence to back it up. Any prosecution now would have to be based mostly on circumstantial evidence and a little bit, well, or somewhat on testimony that has aged significantly. So I thought about how it actually makes sense to keep the dirt on them than to waste it. Being called a tyrant and being, called a dictator when you try to prosecute somebody even for something that they may have done. Because the left would fully come out in cry bully mode. There's no doubt in my mind. In my next subject, I saw a really good video from a gal, and it was called Society's Great Gaslight. Everything is back to normal after COVID. And in that video, she talks about how we are not back to normal. We're not even close to back to normal. All of us have a form of PTSD from the way the lockdowns all went down, the mask mandates, the way the government got all ugly on us, the way businesses broke our trust, the way doctors and scientists broke our trust. And I thought it was really good. I thought it was spot on, and I thought it was good food for thought. And I thought she encapsulated the trauma that we all endured. One of the things that she talks about in there is how it's hard to plan for the future. It has put all of us in a very strange place, because what we now realize is that the government can take our freedom at any moment on a whim. And I think about that stupid mask mandate shit. It didn't even fucking work. All it did is cause division and made us all go crazy on each other, and it didn't stop anybody from getting COVID. And all of the money that was wasted on extra facilities and extra beds and extra ventilators and all that stuff, none of that stuff got used. Here in Denver, they set up a multi-million-dollar facility downtown at the convention center to handle overflow from hospitals. Not a single bed got used. It was a gigantic scam. And we have not gotten back to normal. And I thought her video was great at outlining the ways that it all impacted us. So I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to that. Yeah. The great gaslighting that we've even remotely returned to normal. Right? And my next topic, a good part of the world does not understand at all how the internet works. They don't know how computers work. They don't know how any of this stuff works. They use it, but they don't know how any of it actually does what it does in the background. I think about how ripe you are to be used when you don't understand the systems that you're forced to engage with. So many people just never bothered. If anything, school has done a great job of destroying curiosity, because in times past, if you were curious about something, you would seek the answers. But it seems like we've created a generation that doesn't even want the answers. Answers are a burden. Knowledge is a dangerous thing that you don't want to get associated with knowledge. You don't want to know things. It's dangerous, right? That's almost where we're at now. 1984. It's better to be ignorant and a slave. And as a sort of addendum side note to that, it's only taken about 30 years of the internet to pretty much destroy the fabric of how society previously worked for several hundred years prior to that, right? Yeah. What was touted as something that would dramatically increase our communication and connectedness has sort of, in a weird way, isolated us. I mean, we are all connected, but the connection is less meaningful. It's more ethereal and an abstraction instead of an actual friend. And more communication has led to greater segmentation. Like, it hasn't brought us together, it's divided us into more groups. And not for the good, right? Not for the better. Along with that has come the idea of cancel culture. A fairly recent invention. It was impossible to be canceled in the 80s and the 90s, right? Like, there just wasn't enough reach. There wasn't this ubiquitous, all-seeing, all-knowing, all-remembering internet looming over everybody's heads. And I think about the fact that if we had had cancel culture then, everybody'd be canceled. Yeah. Because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody goes through phases. Everybody does things they're not proud of. Everybody stumbles along the way. And to live in a world where that's never forgotten, to live in a world where you're forever wearing the scarlet letter over every mistake you made, is that really where we want to be? Yeah. As a people, as a society, is that where we want to be? Yeah. And if we don't change it, the entire future is going to be canceled. Everybody in it will be canceled. Or they'll be terrified of the threat of being canceled. Like in some respect, the internet's been great, and in some respect, it's been terrible for that. Yeah. In my next topic, one of the most notable things that I could say going on in Denver about all of the deportation stuff is the complete and utter disappearance of all of the people that used to stand on the street corners with squeegees and squirt bottles and all this stuff trying to wash people's windows. That has completely disappeared from the entire metro area. Not one of those people anymore. So, say what you want to say, Denver is safer as a result of that. Because the guys that would be coming around doing that, it was like they were casing your car. They were sizing you up. They were looking to see if you made the mistake of leaving your purse on the seat or something like that. And it just felt creepy. So I'm glad that they've put the kibosh on all that stuff and rounded them all up and gotten rid of them. It feels safer without all those people lingering around at every traffic stop. Especially because it was starting to get completely out of control. It was one thing if there's one or two guys, right? But there'd be like 6, 7, 8 people walking around, mingling around the cars. Not only did it feel third world, it just didn't feel safe. So I'm glad ICE is out there getting rid of these folks, because now you don't feel like at every single street corner the obligation to support 20 foreigners or be robbed, right? So that's happened. In my next one, we're living in such an information heavy time right now that a good part of what we believed is now called into question by so much conjecture and garbage being interjected into the timeline, where it becomes very difficult to know what the truth was because there's so much other garbage clouding it. Like, for instance, the whole the Holocaust thing. There's so much garbage around that subject now that it makes it almost impossible to know what actually happened in some respects. Yeah, this is how the pollution of your timeline with junk and garbage information clouds the truth. You can obscure something that was a known truth by just injecting a ton of garbage around it, a ton of conjecture. Something that's to be aware of. The contamination of the timeline with garbage information that causes you to question reality or the past. All right. And in my closing thought for this one, the only real competition that you're actually engaged in is to try and be a better version of yourself today than you were yesterday. It's really impossible to be better than other people. All you can do is be the best version of you. That's what I have to say about that. All right. Thanks for subscribing, joining, liking, sharing, talking about it, all of that stuff, okay? Thank you. Thanks for being my people. I hope that you're safe out there, and until we meet again on the next one, and I do hope that everybody's going to join me for that, this has been a Matt Metler production, copyright 2025.